you start working for yourself, you start realizing, okay, thinking outside of the box doesn't work because there is no box.
When is the precise time you need to change the job?
My max was always...
If you've ever felt stuck in your career, like you're doing all the hard work but not seeing the promotions or opportunities you deserve, then you're in for a real treat today. My guest today is April Little. She's an absolute powerhouse in the world of career transformation. With over 15 years of experience as a vice president of human resources at Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies, she knows exactly what it takes to climb the corporate ladder and then leave it. In fact, she done it herself, earning 4 promotions during her career before making the leap to becoming an executive career coach. Her work has been featured in Harvard Business Review, Fortune, CNBC, and the Wall Street Journal. So yeah, she knows her stuff, and she's helped countless professionals not only secure promotions to roles like senior manager and vice president, but also negotiate salaries of up to $400,000. In today's episode, we'll dive deep into her journey from VP to career coach, the secrets to building executive presence, and how to negotiate like a pro to get the career and life you truly deserve. What are the typical mistakes people do when they want to position themselves for promotion?
They keep taking on more work. A lot of people in corporate jobs, they don't realize how valuable their gifts and talents are. And they don't realize that every time they take a new job, they're selling their skill set. There was someone that I was screening that she asked for 80, and I knew that the role started at 100. This is why women in particular and women of color are coming in under, because they're taking this very grateful approach.
How do you negotiate successfully?
Salary negotiations do start with a recruiter. So the first thing you want to do with your salary is...
Hey April, I'm so happy to see you on my podcast. After a year of us supporting each other, now here we are talking to each other. That's great.
I'm excited to be here because you and I have we just found each other and we support each other's content and we work sort of in the same vein.
Yeah, exactly. So it was about time.
It was. We were overdue.
Okay, so let's start with who is April Little, right? This is how you pronounce your last name, Little.
Yes.
Okay. And can you talk about these influences and experiences that you had in your childhood as a young adult that created you and formed your view on life, work, and the universe that you have today?
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised here in Rochester, New York. It's, there's a whole state attached to New York City. I always tell people, and I live in the northern part of it, closest to Canada or Buffalo. And I've been here since then. I went to school here. We grew up in not so great of an area. So culturally for our family, even though we're African American, we still have really strong cultural ties from the South.
Yeah.
Even though we're here in the North, I should say.
Mm.
And some of the things that really shaped my view was my dad worked with his hands for 40 years for the city of Rochester. And that's not something he necessarily wanted us to do. But I grew up dyslexic, which I've shared on LinkedIn. Sometimes I read backwards. Sometimes I still do. And yeah, sometimes I might read it too quickly and I'm like, okay, I didn't grab the whole message here. I don't really see as much as I did when I was a child, but as a result of that, I stayed back in the first grade. Then once I stayed back, my academic career took off. I was a much better student. Now, I wasn't great. So from there, I started realizing that there was a lot of things that were possible for me. And I never thought that I would work in HR. I actually wanted to be a pharmacist. And I worked in a pharmacy for about 5 years until I figured out that that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. Then I got my master's in HR because I did enjoy that part of my job, the working with people, developing. I enjoyed getting developed. And so I got a master's degree in HR. And that happened to be at a time similar to now, sort of an economic downturn in the entire world. So I graduate with all the student loan debt, which I've been relatively public about. And I wasn't able to find a job in HR. So I had to start off as a volunteer recruiter. And I did that for a few months. when I share that story, I'm often met with a lot of resistance that people can't afford to do that. And I certainly could not afford to do it either. But I also couldn't stomach paying back student loans, not working in the field that I wanted to be in. So I only did that on Fridays for a few hours before I was able to land a recruiter job. And from there, I spent my entire career in recruitment and HR. And then around 10 years into my career, I started getting stagnant. I was like, okay, is there more for me? And I started getting more work. And it didn't matter. I started getting more work because I was showing up and doing more. And I wasn't doing it the right way, clearly, because I kept getting rewarded with more work. Then I started leveraging my internal mentors and sponsors. And I was able to go from individual contributor to VP in the last 5 years of my career. And that wasn't because I was favored. It was because I was just kind of sitting on a lot of ambition. And I also, it's not lost on me that I didn't have the right sponsors, mentors, leaders that helped me get there.
I see.
And then from there, I work for myself.
Gosh, it's amazing. Great story. So you would, in your LinkedIn messages that I read, you talk about being treated unfairly, not being overseen for promotions, etc. Can you talk about an example of it and how you did overcome it?
So there was an example. I shared an example recently about, and Annie, I'm sure you've seen it, where there's a ton of companies that are blatantly saying, if you do not come into the office, you will not be considered for a promotion. You'll just always stay a level, whatever you are. I experienced that because prior to this whole remote work boom that we've seen, I would say that working in recruiting was one of the more forward-thinking departments. Most of my recruiting jobs, half of my recruiting jobs were remote prior to 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I've encountered that where I didn't live in headquarters. I live here in Rochester. And so I had to move to Florida to get promoted. And that was the rules that they would put in place. And that happened twice. So one of the remote jobs was in Wisconsin. One was in Florida. And they sort of had the same thing where they wanted their leaders to live by the headquarters and be in person. So the way that I got around that is I started taking on a little bit more strategically where I was managing. I knew I wasn't going to get promoted there, but I also knew I needed that experience before I started applying to some more local jobs. So I started taking on more of the junior recruiters and working with HR specifically to work with anybody that was incoming to the company. I also was the SME for our process. So I do enjoy process improvement. And I really enjoyed recruitment process because we always needed to change that. And I was able to fluently speak to that to get into a lead recruiter role after I left. So I still leveraged the experience and I still did a little bit more work, but it wasn't until that second time I did it that I realized that I didn't have to do my boss's job to get the work done. It was just what was it that I needed? And I knew I needed the people part.
I see. So from your own experience of changing jobs, when do you know? When is the precise time you know? And how do you recognize the moment that you need to change the job? And it's not just the usual down, because we go through ups and downs, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not that down. It's just really you have to change your job.
I will say that there are jobs that are not on my LinkedIn profile, and that influenced how I think about it. I stayed at my first job from 15 to 25. That was at Wegmans. I was there for a long time and I was a night store manager and I stayed there so long and I felt really behind. I just felt behind. I was moving up, but I wasn't moving up fast enough. That experience really started putting in place that career mastery can happen at a year to 2 years, depending on what you're doing. And again, for anyone listening, I've worked in tech, but my job's not technical.
Yeah.
So I realized that that's different when we start talking about engineers and things of that nature, career mastery. But for me, working in a core functions department, non-revenue generating department, even though I would dare to differ on that.
Yeah, me too.
Right. About a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
So my max was always, am I growing? Am I learning? Am I being exposed? Am I getting visibility? Is that happening in 24 months?
Oh, I see. So that's it. 24 months.
24 months.
That's very precise. I didn't expect. So if you cross the 24 months, that's it. You have to move no matter what, because you're just going to be forgotten there.
I would say there were times that I sat in roles closer to 4 years, and I was okay with that. And I didn't necessarily get a title change. That was my role when I was at Grand Canyon University, but I was getting a lot of exposure. So I was recruiting everyone. I was recruiting technical roles. They gave me exposure to that. And I got exposure to recruiting adjunct professors and then full PhD track professors. I got a lot of variety, which made it easier to do that. But that was right before the brink of me wanting to grow. But I would say because I know myself and that I can probably get a little too comfortable, at least earlier career, that's the reason why I've adopted 2 years. Also, there's just enough possibility models for us, Annie, in the workplace where you'll start noticing when people have all the trending lines on their profiles, they're not really sitting, longer than 2 to 3 years max in a position when they've been deemed like a career fast tracker.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, you have to move before this 24 months finish, or about 24 months, you have to start thinking about the next job.
That is correct. Now, I do think that there's a point that you stop doing that. I would say somewhere around the director level role, there might not be enough headcount and maybe you want to stay there. And I have clients like that where they're like, I really earned my spot here. So I do have to figure out some ways to get some development outside of getting a promotion. For me, I had a set timeline of starting my business by the time I was 35. If I did not do that, I knew I wasn't going to. So I should also add that additional context that while that is not what I use for my clients, that was just my personal recipe because I sat for the first 10 years and I didn't do anything. And so I needed to accelerate.
Yeah. Okay, great. Good. This is the first time I hear a timeline. Everybody say, oh, you feel stuck, you don't do this and you grow. And 24 months, that's it, go. Great.
I've been using 24 months. I use 24 months a lot with my clients to say, even if it's not a title, are you getting visibility? Are you starting to be in high stakes meetings with 2-level skip levels, right? What's starting to happen in that time that would keep you in that role longer than 2 years? Again, for a non-technical client.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about that decision for you to leave the corporate world altogether and start your business. Why did you decide to do that?
Because a lot of the things I enjoyed doing were against company policy.
Oh, for instance, what for instance?
For example, I had to leave a pause there. For example, prior to pay transparency being what we know it is today, in the States at least, I was doing that before, and that could have gotten me in trouble. And I remember it vividly as it was yesterday. There was someone that I was screening on for a phone screen. This is probably 5 years ago. She asked for 80, and I knew that the role started at 100. So I said, you're looking for 100. You want 100? She's like, yeah, I want 100. And I found myself doing that a lot because I'm like, you know what? This is why women in particular and women of color are coming in under, because they're taking this very grateful approach to being interviewed, finding a job, and then they're underpaid. And a lot of people think that they can come in at a certain rate and then it'll be course corrected when they come in. And that's just not how it works.
That's the biggest myth that nobody should believe in, because once you're in that seat, you're in, and that you can get 2 to 3% at maximum. Even that, right? So you have to lock it
Agreed.
in. So
that's part of it. I also enjoyed developing my team and training my team and getting them promoted and raises. I enjoyed that part of my job as a leader more than I enjoyed leading the leadership part of my job, where I was in charge of all the executive and confidential recs and making sure that my team was hitting their KPIs every month. The goal was they had to make 6 hires per month. And I was accountable for 30 hires and a total of anywhere from 400 recs that couldn't age me on 90 days. I didn't enjoy that part of my job. I was able to do it and I did it well, but I enjoyed developing them more.
So these were the reasons. So how did you start? How did you prepare to leave the corporate world?
That's a great question. So when I took my director of talent acquisition role at a startup, and for anyone listening, and Annie, I don't know if we'll get to this, if you want to accelerate your career, I know that a lot of people come from this mindset that you can only do that at a Fortune 100, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000. You're going to be sitting on the bench a little bit longer than you probably would like. And I understand there are tactics to get around that. But at the end of the day, it takes a little bit longer. So if you do want to accelerate your career, taking that really vast knowledge and applying it to a smaller startup gets you a bigger title. If
can
you
imagine.
are interested in a title, again, I know that there's a lot of virility around you don't need a title to be a leader. I do believe differently about that. I do believe you can be a leader without a title, but I've seen it not work out if you don't know how to balance that. So if that is something that you're looking for, most of my clients are. They're looking for a title. They're looking to grow, probably going to a more emerging company and helping them get going. And you can take those skills from that larger company and really move the needle faster.
So tell me, when you left and started your own company, what were the things you thought about? What was the plan you made? And talk about also the fact that you have a family and you have 3 kids. Because a lot of people think, and a lot of women, but also men, they think once I have a family, I cannot do that. I have to just stay wherever I am without changing and forget about having my own company because I might fail, etc., etc. But here you are. You have, a woman, a mother, a wife with all the responsibilities and accountabilities, and yet you decided to move. How did it happen?
Yeah. So just getting back to the question that you had, how did I kind of move on? I have been following Justin Welsh for a while. I feel like we all have followed Justin Welsh.
Absolutely, we did.
Influenced us all.
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to move on. I'm 38 now. I wanted to move on at 35. And I was like, if I don't do it by 35, I don't feel like I'm going to do it. Life is just going to get exponentially more expensive. The kids are going to start needing more as they get older. And I would love to get that experience under my belt now. So then in my 40s, I'm well under my way with my business.
Yeah.
Because I consider aging a blessing. So I'm looking forward to all of it.
Totally.
But I will say that really what helped was I started off, believe it or not, wanting to be an executive recruiter for myself. So I made a lot of investments in coaching that does not reflect what I'm doing present day.
Yeah.
I wanted to do that, but then the world went to hell in a handbasket, excuse my French. And I didn't think that was necessarily the best business model. But in recruiting, you're also coaching. And I do believe that one day there will be an executive search leg of my company when my company's not just me.
Yeah.
And I could start offering those services and have some exclusivity with a company. But for now, that's when executive search was born. So I started off by delivering job search services, resumes, LinkedIn, interview prep. And what started happening is I started replacing half of my salary doing that while I was working full-time. So I know that the school of thought is that you should replace your salary, but that's not possible if you are a top performer to replicate yourself that way. So for me, it was with half the effort, can I make half the salary? I did that for 6 months consistently. I didn't have a year saved. I saved somewhere around 4 or 5 months of salary, paid off the van, all the things. My husband did give up his radio career, which I shared yesterday.
Yeah.
And we made a decision to homeschool our kids. So I don't do it all, even though I might look like it. I am not the primary parent. And that I know that could cause some buzz, possibly, but I am not the primary parent of my kids. Certainly, I have my kids, but we knew that there was a better shot of us being successful in living our version of our family dream by going all in with the business. And my husband is actually going to be coming on board to help me scale the business soon. He's reluctantly taking a headshot, and his mother's going to be helping us with the kids 1 to 2 days a week here at the house.
Great. Wow. Interesting. The whole family invested in the undertaking. Great.
Yeah. And I like to share that, Annie, because I know like on pictures, sometimes it looks like it's just me, but it's not. It's not just me. And I want people to know that because I think that there's this misconception. I'm like, oh my God, do I have to do it all? I do think that you have to have some kind of village, whether you were blessed with a village or you have to pay for the village.
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. Everything takes so much more than one person. And especially if you want to be successful and scale, because at one moment, the administrative tasks are so many and you can't continue forward if you don't do them. And that kills the sales part and the business. So I completely understand you because I went through the same commotions like you, right?
You're a mother to twins, your wife.
Exactly the same. So, what was the most surprising that you learned about you when you started working by yourself? The most surprising thing.
I started realizing that I wasn't as organized as I thought because you have all this freedom. We've been taught to work within a box and systems, repeatable systems for success. And we've also been taught that there's kind of like one way, whatever the direction of the company is during that time, the mission, vision, values is what we're going after. And when you start working for yourself, you start realizing, okay, thinking outside of the box doesn't work because there is no box. And then you start realizing that anything works.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Low ticket works. High ticket works. Mid ticket works. It's all about what you decide to double down on. So it's more so, I think the most difficult part is decision making.
That's true. That's absolutely true. And there is nobody to push you, right? You don't have a boss, a colleagues, or anybody else. Nobody's like, oh, where is April? Is she in the office? No. It's only you. You just have to drag yourself up, have a coffee, and start working. And if you don't do that, well, God help you.
Yeah. And I sought that out pretty early on where I was in a mastermind, and I'm open to doing it again when I think it makes sense. But I did join a lot of coaching early on, seeking sort of that co-working feel, but it just really didn't work for me. I think I had to start being comfortable with being my own company, along with any contractors that I would hire for a project here and there. But I had to start getting comfortable being alone and talking my poor husband's head off to try to get some decisions made because I was indecisive pretty early on.
That's normal because everything is new, right? And you're finding your way. So I can relate with that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is why, coaches are like, it's good to get your own career coach. It's good to get your own business coach because your friends and your family, they're not equipped to serve you in that way.
Totally.
It can be helpful to have that fresh take to be like, the answer is right in front of you. You can't see it. And then you have the person point out. You're like,
Exactly. So let's talk about your company and what you help people with. And first of all, you help them grow their careers, right? So for those who are listening and watching, how should people in today's world position themselves for promotion?
I think that the way someone should position themselves for a promotion is it is a multi-step process. But if you want to start standing out, the thing is that you have a brand that you've already built. You probably haven't worked on it. Sort of like a credit score, right? If you're not, you're like, oh, let me check my credit, but maybe you're not paying everything on time. It's the same with starting to get a promotion, starting to assess what people think about you. That's the first thing, because then you start to figure out, like, what is it that I need to clean up? But I also think even before that, Annie, it's also understanding why is it that you want to do this? Get really close to the why, because you'll need that as your North Star when things start getting really difficult about why you want to do it. I can tell you from me and most of my clients, they're not born with generational wealth. And if they are going to be an entrepreneur, the best way to do that is to be highly technical, highly skilled, or to move up into leadership. And as much as there's the call to actions for there to be individual contributor tracks that offer that, we just don't see it.
Yeah.
It's not widely available. So it's getting really close to your why. Why do you want to do this? What do you enjoy? Because that's going to keep you going. And I think the next thing from there is starting to assess what your personal brand score is. What do people think about you? What are they saying? Because that will take time to change those perceptions. That's the first thing. The next thing is to start to assess yourself. It is your job to look at your career ladder or your career framework and see what 1Xing your career vision looks like. Again, measuring yourself against the next role. Putting that in perspective, putting that in place, potentially even identifying potential sponsors and mentors, because I don't think your manager should do that for you. And those sponsors and mentors should be reflective of some of the things you want to do better, because learning through human-to-human interactions is more powerful than any mass online open course or certification program or anything. Then schedule the single subject meeting with your manager and let them know. Start getting the word out. This is where I want to be. See if you can get your manager's support. Half of the time, my clients don't have their manager's support. That's okay. That's why you have everyone else. So then if they're the one person not supporting, they have other people looking at them like, really? Not my experience with this person. Right? And from there, starting to get visible plans, working with your manager to get visibility. You can't just stay in low stakes meetings all the time or low stakes situations. You need to be in high visibility projects and all those things, and starting to get more leadership where you can. So those are sort of the high level things. I do have, so the same way I told you that I look at, you should make a career move after about 2 years. I do try to get that prescriptive with my clients because the information's there. They're looking for the input from me when I can look at their situation, because I call myself a coach because that's a phrase that most people know, but I do consider myself more of an advisor consultant behind closed doors.
I see. And what are the typical mistakes people do when they want to position themselves for promotion? What are the pitfalls?
The number one one is they keep taking on more work.
Yeah.
And they take on work that's not meaningful. And they pride themselves on being the go-to person.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely. I've been in that trap. Yeah. For some reason, we feel very proud that everybody is coming to us to ask us something, or if there is something important to be done, it's us. But then we don't get the praise and the money, right? At all.
Exactly. Whereas it would serve you better to get your strategic thinking cap on and always be the person that has innovative ideas. And maybe those innovative ideas aren't executed by you, which is how you can humble grow. They're not necessarily executed by you. And I think that a lot of people get that wrong. And I've seen a lot of people, particularly during the last layoff a few years ago, they participate in their own planned obsolescence because they don't want to show other people their job. They feel like they have to keep that close to the vest. And then what happens is they don't understand the value of what you deliver. So they're like, well, why can't AI do this person's job? Or why can't this automated system take half of this person's job?
That's a different take, right? Nobody knows what you're doing. You're sitting there doing something, nobody knows about it. And they think that's a good... Yeah, I've heard a lot of different perspectives from you, April, so far. Starting with the 24 months. So another thing you teach your clients is executive presence, right? So what is executive presence? Can you explain to the listeners and those who watch?
I have a different take on that too.
Okay.
Too different than what you've heard. I like to see it as a lot of people when they come to us, Annie, they sometimes don't really feel like they know what executive presence is because unfortunately it's been abused. I've seen it abused. I've seen it abused in the sense of when someone is doing all the work, they're doing all the things, and they can't find anything. That's when character always comes into question. And the way that comes into question at work, especially when someone's going after a leadership promotion, is this person lacks executive presence. And then you're like, well, what is it?
What is that?
Right. And it makes it so hard to define. So I like to describe it to my clients, my audience, as it's your internal uniform. What can I expect out of Annie when she is presenting, when she's informing, when she's influencing, when she's inspiring, even down to how you present yourself physically? It is a uniform. I find that it's more of a uniform, a way of being versus all these different traits and things of that nature. I think it's a matter of, do you have consistent performance overall and your emotional intelligence on all of those things combined? So I like to call it an internal uniform.
I see. So what are the key elements of executive presence? What are the first three things people should do to look?
Yes. So I think that the first thing with executive presence is looking at your emotional intelligence. Because we've all worked with leaders that sometimes erupt, especially when things aren't going their way.
Yeah.
So it's a good idea to start looking at how is it that I handle different situations? How do I handle grace under fire? That's the first one. The second one is, how do I present overall? Do I command presence even on a Zoom call? Is my camera off? So I often have to talk to this. I'm just breaking it down by three. There's many other things that we could probably break it down by. Many of my clients are remote. And so, do you have your Zoom camera on? Are you sitting up straight? Are you walking into that room like you're supposed to be there? And the third leg is, are you a good communicator? Do you know how to land the plane? When you open your mouth, is your governing thought present within that first few seconds of you talking?
Yeah.
And to me, all three of those things make for really good presence.
So how do people, because when you want to be promoted and be on an important project or get to these high stake meetings, you have to speak with seniors, C-suite executives, head of departments. How should people do that? What is the best way and approach to present yourself in a way that they say, okay, I want to have this person on my project, or I should invite them, or they can contribute?
I think it's basic relationship building, but in reverse, in terms of building up those relationships with people. And it's always a good idea to get to know what is it that they care about. So I work with my clients and we work on a relationship map, and every person that we list, what are their key care abouts? Because at the end of the day, that's what they care about, is what's going to drive the needle for their function. So when you're looking to build relationships with those people, there are ways that you can self-promote without being too braggy. For example, if maybe, Annie, I want to get to know you, you're a senior, you're an executive, and I want to potentially work on a high visibility project, the way that I might share that is I might go up, introduce myself and say, I actually read the other day, or I heard you on our last all hands call, that you're running this new initiative. I actually ran a similar initiative in a different vein, of course, with Greg, and he really enjoyed how we were able to deliver that project 10 days beforehand. So if you need any advisement or anyone else on the committee, I'd be happy to. Now, you did a few things. You peeked there. You definitely sort of indulge them. You let them know, hey, I was listening to you. I was really excited about that. And then you can give them the testimonial brag.
Yeah.
To try to get that. But it has to be an intersection. It can't just be, hey, I want to be on your project team.
I see. Yeah. It just doesn't work. You have to give them a little bit of a wider view of who you are. And you were talking about people coming in, women coming in and negotiating salaries, and actually not negotiating, actually. So how do you do that? How do you negotiate successfully? And let's start first with the salary, and then we can talk about other things. But let's start first with the salary negotiations. What do you teach your clients on that?
So because I come from recruitment, I do teach them that salary negotiations do start with the recruiter, especially employer market, which is what we're in right now. That means that the recruiter is sending you over because you meet the skill set and you're within the budget.
Okay.
So the first thing you want to do with your salary is we look at my client's salary. Where are you currently? Where would you like to be? That's the starting range. And then we go about 20K over. So I do an up and over strategy with my clients. In this market, that's what I've seen to be more successful. I do think when it's a candidate-driven market, that might change. That does change, Annie, where we will focus on moving into the direction of maybe we place some numbers closer to the vest. We give them a number, but we give them a different number towards the end. However, in this current market, the reason why I recommend that people kind of be upfront with what their range is, and you have a range across, is because you don't know what the full scope of that job is, and you need an opportunity to go through the full geometry of the interview process. You'll get a better view of the role to have that final number. Plus, you don't know how much insurance costs. I've had this happen, and I've shared this story before, where I'll never forget. I hired an accountant. I want to say the offer was for 120, and he was making 90. But our insurance was not great at my last company, 2 companies prior. And he and his wife did the numbers, and it would have only been a 10K increase. So he stayed where he was.
I see. Okay, so
that's why it's so important to get acquainted with, know what your numbers are, know what the fully loaded costs are to live your life, to be paid, like even insurance, and then have that number ready for the recruiter.
I see. And if the job comes without a number, what do you suggest? Because a lot of people, they go to interview and the recruiter asks, so what is your current job? And they say, let's say 80. And the recruiter says, oh, very nice. my base is 120, but they want 80. I'll tell them, okay, fine. We can do 90, right? So this is the way to not give the full grade, right? And save some. How do you approach that question?
The first way that we approach the question is, do you have a budget that you like to share, right? Typically, if they're asking, they probably don't have the budget. They're not necessarily headquartered in a pay transparency state where they have to do that.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is look up companies that are similar size to find out what salaries are. You can reach out to people. I haven't seen a lot of luck with that unless you have some first or second degree kind of connections in play here to be able to get someone on the phone and say, I just want to get an idea of what the salary is. I haven't seen that. It is a play, but that's typically with pre-existing relationships to be introduced. That's another play. The next thing is to look up any job postings that are in pay transparency states. So I'm only talking about here for the States, but I realize like even in Europe, if there's something similar, it's looking up where have they had to publish salaries before? Can I go back and look at that?
Yeah.
I always start there to get an idea. So the first thing is to look at similar size companies and what that pay is. The second thing is leverage, and that could be interchangeable. Leverage any relationships that you have to see if you can have coffee chats with people. Again, that is your result there is going to be determined by pre-existing relationships and things of that nature. And I think the next thing from there is to look at any job postings that are in a pay transparency state, which some of my clients have done, even in light of them not sharing the range in the other state.
I see.
And that has been helpful. Now, I do have a fourth strategy. When you are looking at startups do tend to pay 20% more sometimes. They like to create a velvet coffin for you that's hard to get out of. I like to pay a little bit more, but it is still good to look. So there are some tools. I don't have them on hand. The last one, I have it here on my Google Chrome. When I worked at a startup, we did have comp tools. And it could be a good idea to pay for official comp tools that startups use. Some of them are only $50 a month, but I think when you're looking at salaries above 200,000 USD, that might be worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about negotiations when you are inside the company and, as we talked in the beginning, they start giving you more and more work and they say, okay, we'll give you this because, if you prove that you can do that, then you can get the promotion or get to the new level or the new salary. And that never happens. So what is the strategy here? How do we get out of this situation?
The question was how to get money incongruent to the work that you're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's actually really timely. I had a laser coaching call last week for that, where the person is demonstrating a lot of extra leadership. They're taking on more work. They're the go-to person. Their leader is not going to the other people who won't get the work done because they want to go to that person because they know that they don't need to check the work.
Yeah.
And it'll just get done. So what we did the first thing to do is to think about, I try to put my HR cap on to think about what is it that they're going to say that you need to defend yourself against. Well, we don't have the budget. Okay. But you probably already researched that they do have the budget. Oh, we don't give off-cycle increases. Well, that's not true. You gave someone in IT a nice off-cycle increase recently. So it's starting to have some of those things already put together. But typically I tell people to put together kind of like a 5-slide page deck, right? Just something very quick. It needs to be approached as a single subject meeting because you want people to pay attention. You don't want your ask to be amongst many other asks. I don't think there's anything wrong with introducing that you're going to be scheduling on a one-on-one. But your interest will be lost to the work if you schedule that amongst other things. So the first thing is to start putting all that stuff together. Do your research. Do your research the same way you would externally. Look up the salaries that they have posted in the companies. A lot of the times, your salary will not raise at the same rate as an external salary. So you're going to be sticker shocked, and you'll have to process that you might be 20K under. And most times when people start figuring out that they're underpaid, it's not even, it's 20K. Because I feel like, again, this is another Aprilism. You start feeling the difference in your salary when you're brought up by 20K, not 10. Because 10 just is eaten up with taxes. So by the time you figure it out, you're chronically underpaid. So that's the first thing. It's also trying to get some information, not to say, I know that Bob makes more than me. That never works. But what is more powerful is to say, it has been brought to my attention that I'm not at peer level. You don't have to use names. You know where you are. And if you know where you are in the pay position, because pay position starts from 0 to 100, most people are brought in at 50%. So if you know that you're at 60% and most people are at 70%, you can start using that language without throwing people under the bus. Because I don't think it's fair to penalize other people because they knew how to negotiate for themselves and maybe you didn't.
Totally.
Right? Or maybe they came in at a different time. But I will say that that is a good starting point, is to figure out where are people in pay position. Also, start looking at where are you, again, on the career ladder. Get those competencies down. Also get some social proof from maybe 3 of your sponsors. Get some recommendations for you at the next level or for a raise, and make sure that their testimonials line up to the competencies. So you want all those things to sort of be in alignment. Meet with your manager and let them know, this is where I need to be. Can you help me get there? Can I have your support? Never ask for their permission.
Great suggestions. So I can see what makes you successful because I see all these testimonials from clients. But what do you think is the key to success in this game of promotion, negotiation, and getting what you deserve?
I think the thing that, even as a coach, that is hard to teach, I can teach you confidence, but you have to do it. You have to do it. And you have to believe that if I'm going to be here and I got a family and I got bills and I got dreams and I want to buy a house and I want to do all these things, then I want to build legacy for myself and I want to be in this role, you have to believe that you're ready for it.
So
that's first, because I can help you with the strategy. I can help you with the tactics all day. But the truth is that a lot of my containers, this is me being transparent, they're not long enough to help you rebuild your confidence by itself. Because I don't think confidence is just a feeling. I think it's us setting goals together. So we do build your confidence and we start breaking them up. Where are you comfortable? Okay, I broke this down into 4 steps. Can we break it down into 6? As you starting to do those things. The same way maybe you're not comfortable speaking up. Because I primarily work with women who aren't good at speaking up, even though they're good at doing the work. And that starts with getting to know, if you want to start speaking up, that starts with getting to know the agenda, starting to watch your surroundings. What are people talking about? Who moves the room? And then the next time, piggyback off somebody. And then the next time, introduce a new thought. And that's how you start building your confidence. That's how you visibly start doing it. And so I like to think of it more so as an action.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What I used to do when I was afraid to speak, because I was in the beginning of my career, I would go and speak with several people and say, I'm going to say this. Can you support me? And then that was my kind of way to feel confident. And they support me. And then the next time is that much more easier for me.
I love that, Annie, because when people present, they think that they're supposed to get the buy-in at the presentation. What you just described is that the buy-in happens long before. The audience analysis happens long before you get ready to ask for something.
No, absolutely. And I also always tell people that when the meeting happens, it's just the manifestation of everything that already has been agreed in the background, what you have prepared, etc. The meeting is really, you sit there and you have to agree around the topic. But everybody should know this topic. They should have spoken about it. That's how a successful meeting goes. And then you've done the groundwork and you just use the meeting to just get the final yes, rather than, start the negotiation now.
Absolutely.
Well, people think that getting at the meeting is the first step, but actually is the last.
I agree.
So what are the 3 key pieces of advice you would give to people who are wondering and worrying and are fearful of leaving their positions and starting something on their own, but they really want to do it?
If you want to start something on your own, I would say that it's a good idea to start thinking about that possibly 1 to 2 years in advance. Again, this is me getting very specific. It's a good idea that first year that you're thinking about it is getting really clear on what is it that you want to help people with. Because a lot of people in corporate jobs, Annie, and I'm sure you've seen it, they don't realize how valuable their gifts and talents are because they don't realize that every time they take a new job, they're selling their skill set.
Totally.
And it's starting to convert seeing yourself from an intrapreneur to an entrepreneur. It's really the same thing in a lot of ways. You managing your career as though you're the CEO. So start thinking about what is it that I want to get really comfortable with. And the reason why it's good, because that's going to be your North Star, because your mind's going to change a lot sometimes when you just start entrepreneurship. So it's really good to get clear on your why. And then before that, there's other things you need to do. Get your finances in order. I'm not a believer that you need to save up your salary. It's the responsible things to do, but practically it's not realistic for a lot of people. I think it's giving yourself at least 6 months runway. But even before that, it shouldn't be you starting and not making any money. You should not give yourself permission. This is me being very bold. You are able to give yourself permission to do anything you want, but I don't recommend you give yourself permission to leave your job until you're making at least half of your salary doing half of the work.
That's great.
From there, you have created bare baseline outside of that 6 months you have saved. You've created baseline housing expenditures with half, right? That's baseline. That means that's all needs, not wants. But I also think it's really important for you to figure out, do I pay for help during this time? I'm working. Do I get a coach? Because you have to start retraining how you think about yourself, because you're thinking, I've been thinking in a box, let me think out of the box. And you need to realize there's no box.
Yeah, totally.
And that takes a long time to unwire. Very long time, that you have a lot of freedom. And so it's really good to work with a coach, because if you are really structured and you start your business off that way, where you have SOPs, where you're really structured in client delivery, things of that nature, that will be the thing that will keep you going.
I see. No, absolutely. And having coaches is so important. One of these coaches, he was more a mentor. He told me to plan something, definitely, but also have in mind that once I leave the corporate life, I will start thinking in a completely different way. And I might see about 110 other opportunities, which I haven't seen because I think only with a cap on of a corporate employee, right? And the moment you get out and start meeting different people, there are different ideas that come to you.
Yeah, you just start seeing that the world is truly your oyster at that point.
Exactly.
You need to do whatever you want. I have changed my business model three times. I started off doing more resume, job search marketing materials, right? Resume, LinkedIn. Once I got ready, I started doing job search. Job search didn't fully fulfill me. Job search is certainly a side effect of what we do when we figure out maybe the time frame is not there for your promotion. You know, it's going to take you 2 years to change perceptions. We can tell with this decision maker, because perceptions don't change as fast as they're made. All those things coupled, then job search does happen. But then I moved into more development, where I work with more communication and strategy to help you get promoted.
Great. That was a great discussion. Thank you so much for all the tips and advices that you gave to people, and very different approach to all these standard classical questions. You gave very, very different approach, which is great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Please hit subscribe to the show and leave a review or comment about how you find this episode.